She was a hard-working mother and entrepreneur.
She lived with her mother-in-law and her husband, and she had 5 children.
She was the one who was bringing in all the money, so they were relying on her.
Until a bold new venture put her in the crosshairs of a dangerous enemy.
One of the bullets went into a room that was occupied by a baby.
The panic, the fear, life as you knew it is no longer the same.
But was it the cost of doing business with the wrong people, or a personal vendetta?
Because of the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt. When people want revenge, they usually want it right away.
July 10th, 2006. Around 2:45 a.m., police in Largo, Florida respond to a reported break-in at a business in town.
The owner is a 39-year-old woman named Christina Ladrini. By the time officers arrived, she was waiting for them inside. It looks like some windows of the building had been shattered.
A witness had called it in from a nearby laundromat, and Christina had been immediately notified. But before an investigation even begins, Christina receives more disturbing news.
She's still giving a report to police when the phone rings. It's her husband, and he just said he heard gunshots outside of their house.
As the officer with Christina calls it in, she calls in an employee to supervise the shop so she can go home to her family. Deputies from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department are immediately dispatched to the couple's home.
Christina's family lived about 3 miles away in the neighboring town of Clearwater. When officers got there, they found glass all over the place, and the couple's minivan had been shot up.
No one was injured, but it still had to be very frightening.
Christina Ladrini has 5 children. They range in ages, including an 11-month-old baby. Everybody was freaking out, especially since it's in the middle of the night. It shakes an entire neighborhood.
No one else in the neighborhood appears to have suffered any damage. And since the shooting occurred just an hour after the break-in at Christina's shop, one thought is on everyone's mind.
Either this couple has the worst luck in the world, or someone was targeting them.
To those who knew her, Christina Ladrini was a loving wife and mother, doing everything she could to support her family.
Christina Ladrini was the eldest of 5 kids. In fact, she had 5 kids of her own. She came from a very hard-working family, and she valued family and health over wealth.
Growing up, it seemed like Christina was the typical girl next door. Sweet, well-intentioned, always seeing the best in people, including the man that she eventually fell in love with, Vincent Ladrini.
Vincent was known as kind of a bad boy, but to Christina, he was handsome, he was fun, he was a nice guy.
And after just a few years of marriage, Christina's faith seemed to have paid off.
They both had jobs, and they had a nice little house in Clearwater. It was a great place to raise their kids. From the outside looking in, they were just one big happy family.
Christina Ladrini had such a huge heart. She was a patient care technician. Her whole mission was to take care of her family. So in order to do that, she was willing to work as hard as she possibly could.
Over time, Christina even managed to put aside enough for her husband, Vincent, to start his own business.
Christina's husband kind of had big dreams. He didn't want to work for anybody else. He had aquariums in his house and thought he could run a business. So Christina had opened a business for him. He was gung-ho putting it together, but when it came down to the work, he didn't show up. So it was 6 months and the business went under.
With 5 kids under 18 and their resources running out, it fell on Christina to find a way to make ends meet.
She was pretty much the one who was bringing in all the money. So they were relying on her to pay for everything.
Christina was determined not to let this affect her children, But a patient care salary was simply not enough to live on. And so when she was offered an opportunity to make a lot more money, she took it without asking many questions.
The job turned out to be managing a store where the girls provided a variety of different services. In the front, they sold lingerie, aromatherapy candles, and stuff like that. In the back was used for lingerie modeling.
It wasn't Christina's dream job by any stretch of the imagination, but it was legal, it paid well, and she didn't have to entertain any clients.
It wasn't long before Christina's financial difficulties were over.
We're talking about a considerable amount of money. And no matter how strange the job may be, that's hard to say no to. After a year or so, she worked her way up.
She made more than enough to provide for her family, and in fact, she was able to actually start putting money aside again. But this time, Christina decided to invest in herself. She opened up a lingerie shop with one of her friends named Marcy.
Christina had to think about her children's futures, and she probably wasn't going to be able to put 5 kids through college working for someone else. Starting a business seemed like the next logical step.
There were already some similar businesses in the area, but Christina was convinced that the area could support one more. So when they saw a vacancy on Ulmerton Road, they wasted no time signing a lease.
But this new business venture would also run into trouble. Just 10 days after the grand opening, someone had broken into Christina's business and shot her husband's minivan full of holes, and police want to know why.
The 2 crimes occurred like an hour apart. Nothing stolen, just property damage. It looked like someone might be trying to send Christina a message.
Coming up, a disturbing phone call points investigators toward 2 possible suspects.
They were alleged to have serious problems with drugs, and plenty of people have seen at least one of them carrying a gun.
Florida police are investigating a pair of crimes against Christina Lodrini and her family. A break-in at her business in Largo, and shots fired outside their home in nearby Clearwater.
Investigators from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office were at the couple's home getting statements. Vincent and his neighbors reported hearing 4 or 5 gunshots, but it appeared that the only damage was to the minivan.
The front windshield was cracked in 3 places. 2 of the passenger side windows and the driver's side windows were shot out. And there was a bullet hole in the left rear quarter panel of the vehicle.
Thank God nobody got hit, nobody got shot, nobody got hurt.
A forensics team carefully inspects the area, but no shell casings or any other evidence can be found.
The first thing detectives are going to ask, do you have any enemies? Can you think of anybody that might want to hurt you?
Vincent couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm himself or his family.
He managed to catch a glimpse of the vehicle. However, Vincent said that after he heard the shots, he ran outside and saw a silver or gray SUV driving with no lights on. Unfortunately, it was too dark for him to get a license plate.
While Christina waits for her business partner to arrive, detectives start investigating the break-in scene.
The window had been shattered there as well, but there didn't appear to be any bullet holes. And there were no reports of gunfire in the area, so it was possible that it was unrelated. And they were looking for 2 different sets of suspects.
You might think attempted robbery, but when they walk Christina through the scene, there's nothing missing. That makes it look more like an act of vandalism.
Christina says she has no idea who had vandalized the shop. No angry customers, nor disgruntled employees. So maybe it's a group of teenagers or someone making trouble.
Unfortunately, police couldn't get any fingerprints from either the shattered glass or the front door.
While investigators finish their walkthrough with Christina, uniformed officers take a statement from the man who called in the report.
He had been washing his clothes at the 24-hour laundromat next to Christina's business. He said he was in his car waiting for the clothes to dry when he heard the sound of breaking glass. So he took cover and called police.
Unfortunately, that means he didn't see who did it, and he didn't see anyone leaving the scene at the time of the crime.
They hadn't found any leads at home nor at the store. And while police weren't sure if the two crimes had anything to do with one another, if you're Christina, you gotta be pretty shaken up at that point.
When her business partner arrives, Christina returns home to care for her family. But as they try to recover, Christina receives an ominous phone call.
It was almost 6 a.m. at that point, and she just got finished talking to police. So she let it go to voicemail.
The voice wasn't one that she recognized, and in fact, she couldn't even tell if the voice were male or female. But the message they left was disturbing. They said they were representing their clients and that next time there would not be warning shots.
Christina immediately notifies police, and officers are sent to watch over the family.
She's terrified. She has no idea what "my client" means. That's something a lawyer would say, and that's obviously not the case here.
Whoever it was, they made it clear that these were targeted attacks. They shot up the family minivan, which could be taken as a threat to hurt her kids if she didn't do what they wanted. The problem was, they didn't say what they wanted, so there's nothing that she can do to stop it from happening again.
The panic, the fear, life as you knew it is no longer the same.
Detectives began interviewing Christina's employees and business associates, hoping to find a lead. They quickly come up with the names of 2 possible suspects.
One of the employees tells police that she and Christina used to work at a shop nearby owned by a woman named Kristen. She claims that Kristen and her boyfriend Donald were heavy drug users, and Donald often carried a gun.
Kristen apparently had a reputation for threatening former employees when they found work elsewhere, so Christina starting a rival business could clearly have set her off.
Christina's business partner, Marcy, even told detectives that she thought it might be Donald's voice on their threatening message.
Investigators traced the phone call, but unfortunately, the number is not registered to Donald or Kristen.
It's one of those pay-as-you-go accounts. What police call a burner phone. Anyone could set one up with any name they choose. So that turned out to be a dead end.
However, police find a possible connection. A witness places Donald and Kristen at the scene just a couple blocks from the shooting.
A convenience store clerk recognized 2 people matching the couple's description hanging around the store. They were in a 4-door truck with a broken back window.
Could this be the vehicle Christina's husband saw speeding away from their house after the shooting?
Christina told police that Donald and Kristen didn't live anywhere near her, so it was very suspicious they were there around the time of the shooting.
Detectives recommended that she activate the security cameras at her shop and install cameras outside the house as well. If they catch anyone lurking around, it'll help establish a pattern of harassment when it comes time to press charges.
Christina takes investigators' advice and installs the cameras. But no one could have anticipated what they would record. Coming up, more shots are fired, and this time, the consequences could be devastating.
Those bullets went through, hit a mirror above the baby's bed.
The morning after the attacks on Christina Lodrini's home and business, detectives in Largo, Florida have come up with a pair of possible suspects. 2 rival business owners named Kristen and Donald.
Christina kind of stepped on their toes by opening a competing store, so clearly they were persons of interest in this case.
There was no direct evidence yet linking the couple to the shooting. Since the voicemail that Christina received had threatened further harm, police were taking it very seriously, and so was she.
The lead detectives, he tells her to go get a surveillance camera. So she heads to her local Walmart, invests $25 into a camera for her home.
In the meantime, investigators are searching for their suspects, but so far, it looks like the pair are trying to avoid them.
They reached out to everyone who knew these 2. Family, friends, neighbors, former employees. There's no way they didn't know police wanted to speak to them, but they still didn't surface. If they were innocent, you would think they'd want to come in and clear up any confusion.
Weeks pass, and thankfully, Christina and her family come under no further attacks.
Life sort of returned to normal, both at work and at home. The summer was winding down, and the kids were going back to school, and despite a rocky start, her business was actually doing pretty well.
It seemed like whoever threatened her might have gone away or given up, but investigators were still working the case.
A month and a half later, on August 24th, Donald and Kristen finally show up in a Pinellas County courthouse.
Turns out, they've been summoned on completely different charges, but investigators instantly recognized their names and brought them in for questioning.
They both lawyered up and would not talk. That certainly looked like they had something to hide, but without concrete evidence, police couldn't charge them with anything.
At that point, the investigation had basically hit a roadblock. The upshot is the danger to Christina and her family seems to be over.
But in the early morning hours of September 7th, police get another urgent call from Christina.
911, what is your emergency?
I just had shots fired into my house.
At what address, ma'am? Does anybody need a paramedic?
No, we don't, but I do need,
Let me put you right on the phone with the sheriff's office.
What Christina describes is completely terrifying. The previous gunshots were aimed at a vehicle. This time, whoever it was fired 6 shots directly into the Lingerie home, with 8 people asleep inside.
You have a home here now that's riddled with bullets. You have bullets actually lodged in the wall. You have a TV damaged. You have windows shattered. And you have even an 11-month-old baby grazed by some of that glass.
Those bullets hit a mirror above the baby's bed where glass fell into the baby's bed. To hear those rounds being fired and hearing glass break in your residence in the early mornings, gotta be bone-chilling.
If the gun's pointed a little bit lower or a little bit higher or a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right, this could have gone so much worse and would have been a real tragedy.
It seems that whoever threatened Christina and her family wasn't finished after all. But this time, investigators are hopeful that the suspect has been caught on tape.
Christina verified that the security cameras that she installed outside of her home were working. So they rolled back the footage to the time of the attack.
Thankfully, the coverage of the camera provided a pretty good look at the shooter. It appeared to be a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, and the way it goes down is extremely alarming to police.
It was chilling. You saw a vehicle pull up and stop. You saw a person get out, moving in a very particular way. Her gait, the person's movement, was noticeable. And then you saw that person pull out a weapon and start firing. And it's jarring because you don't see something like that often, thank God.
The way she's aiming and firing the gun. Officers know it all too well. Something clicks in their mind that this must be someone who's trained in law enforcement.
But that's not the only surprise.
The video is grainy. You may not be able to see the woman's face, but her walk is unmistakable. And it's a walk that Christina knows all too well. It's one of her closest, dearest friends.
Christina identifies the shooter as 30-year-old Courtney Savage, her best friend and former business partner.
The images shook her to the core. Why would Courtney have such animosity towards her?
They apparently spoke on the phone nearly every day. You think if your best friend had a problem with you, they'd tell you what it was before they started shooting.
Coming up, an officer of the law becomes a woman out for revenge.
She was angry, and she didn't deal with that anger very well.
Christina Lodrini and her family have once again been the target of a terrifying attack. And what's even more frightening is the identity of the shooter.
This isn't some stranger with a grudge. Courtney Savage is one of her closest friends. And not only that, it turns out she's a former police officer.
Courtney wanted to be in law enforcement since she was a teen, so she trained for it. And that's where she met her husband as he was going to be a police officer also.
I started dating my husband at the time when we were in the Corrections Academy, and we ended up getting married in March of '99.
After they graduated from the academy, they both got jobs working at Florida prisons.
I was hired as a correctional officer for Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Worked there for a little while, but I wanted to, go onto the law enforcement side. So I got a position as a reserve officer for Tampa Police Department.
However, Courtney quickly discovered the job wasn't all she hoped it would be.
She was not making much money. I think she was making $8 an hour, and it was very difficult.
You're right on the streets with them. You're in full uniform and you're, doing everything a regular police officer would do. The only thing is that you are part-time. It was stressful.
She saw ads in the paper for lingerie modeling. So she looked into it, and there was really very little that I could do to change her mind.
Soon, Courtney was earning more as a model than she could have ever imagined.
We wanted to take vacations, if we wanted to, whatever we wanted to do, we had the money for, which was a help. And it was good for a while.
Courtney eventually decided to go into business for herself.
What was the point in working for other people that she could do the same thing? She could own the shop. So she went around, looked for a place to rent. She found one. She stocked it. She hired people to help her.
One of the people Courtney hired was Christina Lodrini.
She was reliable and responsible, kind of someone you can always call, you can count on. I automatically said, I want her to come work for me.
They worked well together, and as they got to know each other, they became close friends.
So in 2005, when health problems left Courtney bedridden, she turned to Christina for help.
Courtney was ill due to heavy metal poisoning from dental work she received.
She went to Mexico to have her teeth done. Unfortunately, the products that they use for the teeth down there have a lot of mercury and other chemicals in them.
Started having grand mal seizures. I had pain all over. It was terrible. High fevers. It was bad. I was on a lot of seizure medicine. I was on a lot of antidepressants, sleeping medicine, sedatives, everything you can think of. I had a laundry list of pharmaceuticals I had to take every day.
So she was in no condition, emotionally, physically, mentally, to be at a business, let alone run it. So, she took a couple of months off. She entrusted the business to someone she considered a friend.
I knew Christina for 9 years. She was my best friend. I thought I could rely on her.
Christina tells detectives that she kept the shop running as long as she could, but she ran into an unforeseen problem.
She approached the landlord to renew her lease, but the landlord told her he was actually going to give it to the bar owner next door so he could expand his business.
That was not the kind of problem she expected to deal with when she agreed to help out, but Courtney was in no place to handle it, so she had to do something.
But Christina wasn't going to stop there. She made a vow to her friend. She actually begged the landlord to please reconsider. She even offered to double the rent, but the landlord simply would not budge.
Christina says she was forced to clean out Courtney's shop and made arrangements to return the unsold merchandise.
It wasn't her fault, but I'm sure she still felt terrible about it.
In Christina's eyes, they parted amicably. She thought that her friend knew that she did everything that she could to save the business, and these circumstances were out of control.
It's definitely the type of thing that can cause bad blood between friends, but this had happened more than a year ago. So if Courtney held a grudge, you would think she would have done something about it before now.
Christina has identified Courtney as the shooter captured on tape, but the footage is too grainy to guarantee a conviction. So investigators ask Christina to help them obtain more evidence.
Detective Lewis had Christina make a controlled phone call. to Courtney, asking her strategic questions about the shooting of the residents and her involvement.
She called me and accused me, oh, did you shoot up my house? And I said, are you crazy or something? I don't know, something like that.
However, it quickly becomes clear that Courtney still blames Christina for what happened to her business.
Courtney denies at first that she had anything to do with the shooting. But after further pressing, Courtney admits that she was very angry at Christina, felt that she drove the business into the ground.
I would call the shop and nobody would answer. And I thought, what are they doing? Then my landlord, he told me the story that she hadn't paid any rent, that he had put a formal eviction on her door.
Christina denies the landlord's allegations, but the more they discuss it, the angrier Courtney becomes.
The motivating factor was revenge. She felt manipulated, taken advantage of.
Tina had ruined her business, had lied to her, had betrayed her.
When Christina finally asks Courtney what she can do to end the attacks, investigators get the closest thing they've heard to a confession.
She offered me a figure, like $2,000 or something, and asked, well, will it stop? And I said, well, that's a start.
They agreed to meet at a diner in Clearwater at 10 p.m. Christina tells Courtney she'll bring the money in cash, but police are there waiting for her.
Coming up, Courtney's arrest takes an unexpected turn.
She lunged for a weapon that was in the glove box.
Less than 24 hours after security cameras caught former police officer Courtney Savage firing a gun into Christina Ladrini's house, detectives are getting ready to arrest her.
The trap has been laid because Christina is able to convince Courtney to meet her so she could give her $2,500 that Courtney feels that she is owed.
Officers follow Courtney to the diner where they spring the trap. But the arrest doesn't exactly go according to plan.
Because of Courtney's training, the police knew that they had to move very quickly. They could not give Courtney the upper hand.
My doors automatically unlock my truck, and I see this person coming up alongside of my truck, just like slithering alongside of my truck, and rips my door open. And in one fluid movement, he grabbed me from the seat to the ground, and started tasing me.
It was conveyed to me that she lunged for a weapon that was in the glove box and had to be tased.
Never said, this is a please get out, nothing. It was open my door and snatch at me. So of course my reaction is going to be like, what do you know, there was no time to resist. I didn't know what was going on.
Back at the station, detectives give Courtney a chance to explain herself.
When a suspect is taken into custody, a lot of times they shut down. They don't say anything. But Courtney surprises everybody. She's willing to talk.
Well, I'm an honest person, you know, and I figured it would be easy for me if I just, you know, told the truth. Yeah, I did it, you know. I shot into a house. I mean, I was the type of law enforcement officer that if you were straight with me, I was gonna go easy on you. That's the way I was, and I just assumed that was the best route to go.
Courtney goes into great detail on why she did it. She claimed that Christina owed $2,500 in unsold merchandise that was never returned to her, and $15,000 worth of other business equipment that went missing when the shop was under Christina's supervision. She felt completely betrayed.
But instead of confronting her friend, Courtney had let her anger fester for almost a year.
A few months after Courtney recovered from all of her health problems, she discovered Christina was about to open another business with a different friend. This set her over the edge.
She told me that she was very, very angry at Tina, wanted to get back at her, wanted to get revenge.
This is a bizarre case because when people want revenge, they usually want it right away. Courtney Savage acted out over a 90-day period.
According to Courtney, the first attack was intended to put Christina out of business.
Courtney said she hoped that Christina's landlord would revoke her lease. If she was attracting that kind of trouble, maybe they would have evicted her.
And Courtney used a voice-disguising device to leave Christina threatening voicemails.
When that didn't work, things sort of escalated from there. Christina hadn't responded to the voicemail threats, so she decided to go over there in the middle of the night to vent her frustrations.
I just lost it and went over there and just, I guess I was trying to scare her,
Despite narrowly avoiding any casualties, Courtney insists that she never meant to harm anyone.
I'm a master marksman. The reason I got out of the truck was to make sure that my bullets just didn't fly everywhere. I wanted to make sure that I was, aiming to a point where I could see where my bullets were going.
She said she was the one driving the SUV that Christina's husband saw leaving the scene. There were no accomplices. The SUV was a rental, so she wouldn't be recognized.
I didn't want to use my vehicle, And plus, the vehicle was also my husband's truck, so I didn't want him to get in trouble or anything.
She even tells investigators where to find the gun she used.
Courtney says the Glock isn't the one they're looking for. She actually used the .357, which she got rid of afterwards.
Courtney had hidden the gun in my mother's mobile home shed down in Clearwater.
She filled out a written statement confessing to all of her actions. As far as she was concerned, that would be the end of it. She would just get probation.
I cooperated with the detectives. I was originally charged with shooting into an occupied dwelling, and I'd never been arrested before, and I didn't foresee any major problems from it.
It's the first clue that investigators have that she feels she did nothing wrong.
Had the mercury poisoning from her botched dental work affected Courtney's judgment?
It definitely was not in my normal state of mind. When you chew food or when you drink something hot, the heavy metal releases a vapor and it goes up into your brain. And what they used to call that was Mad Hatter syndrome.
If Courtney was expecting a slap on the wrist, she is sorely mistaken.
They sent me over to the jail side. I tried to arrange bond right away. And then I couldn't arrange bond because they pulled back the shooting to an occupied dwelling charge and started amending it.
The allegations were very serious, and it happened on more than one occasion, so the state attorney's office would be coming hard at Courtney.
Coming up, a routine hearing turns into a nationwide manhunt.
Had a whole new identity.
She was considered a fugitive of justice.
Courtney Savage has confessed to firing 6 bullets into the home of her best friend, Christina Ladrini, as payback for letting her business fall into ruin.
I knew I'd never get any money back. I knew I'd never have my business back. I just wanted her to admit that she betrayed me.
Despite the fact that no one was injured, there is a lot for prosecutors to consider when weighing the charges. The fact that Courtney seemed to believe that what she did wasn't that big of a deal certainly didn't help.
The charges against Courtney are increased to include 8 counts of attempted murder.
The district attorney at the time threatened Courtney with 7 life sentences. We were terrified.
At that time, her and her husband were going through a divorce. The divorce was finalized, and she obtained some money from the divorce, which allowed her to post a bond.
Courtney's preliminary hearing is set for July 20th, 2007, but she never shows up.
When she found out that they were changing the charges, she made up her mind to go on the run. She went on the lam in Mexico. to have plastic surgery to alter her profile.
I, packed some bags and left everything behind. I had a brow lift, an eye job, nose job, chin contour, had a whole new identity, clean identity I purchased.
The court immediately issues a warrant for her arrest, and the manhunt begins.
She was considered a fugitive of justice. Detective Lewis did an excellent job and did everything that any seasoned investigator would have done. He tracked down old friends, interviewed the mom, and even tracked her up to New Jersey, where she was from, finding old acquaintances.
But despite their best efforts, Courtney manages to elude police for over a year. And with her new appearance, she returned to the U.S. undetected.
I'd laid low for a while in Oklahoma. I figured, what's a great place to blend in? I didn't use any credit. I had worked 2 different bartending jobs, actually, and they both paid under the table. I was in Oklahoma for about 5.5 months.
Florida police weren't making any headway, so they eventually chose to enlist the help of the media.
It was posted in the Tampa paper that I was going to be on America's Most Wanted.
The episode featuring Courtney airs on September 20th, 2008, 2 years after the initial shooting.
It was very upsetting. I wanted to turn away, but I had to watch it. I had to. It was the first time I had seen the video of her shooting into Tina's house, and it was just anger and sadness and hopelessness, because you don't know what you can do to get your child out of this terrible predicament.
2 days later, a viewer calls the tip line with her location.
I had a really, really bad feeling that day, just horrible feeling. And I saw this man watching me. So I ran around the corner and I started to call my boyfriend at work. And as I was walking around the corner, here comes 2 patrol units. And I knew they were for me.
Surveillance deputies identified her. The team leader made a decision to approach, and they arrested her and took her into custody.
This time, Courtney doesn't resist. She is quickly extradited back to Florida.
She had to face the original charges that she was facing when she left. The state attorney's office added yet another charge for failing to appear in court. Her maximum exposure was, again, more than 100 years in jail.
She still had the option of taking her case to trial, but with that much evidence against her, she had very little chance of winning.
We started offering different pleas, and they kept rejecting them. Then eventually they came back with 20 and 10, or go to trial.
It was the best she could have expected, given the serious nature of these charges.
On April 15th, 2009, Courtney Savage pleads guilty to all charges. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
For Christina, you can imagine that justice is finally being served. It's finally closure for the victim's family and closure for police, too.
It was a terrible crime, but I thought the sentence was a bit much. You lock someone up, throw them away, and you don't give them any kind of counseling.
In my heart of hearts, I really believe that if she had stayed and she didn't run, she would have gotten a much better sentence than she ended up with.
What started out as best friends involved in a business had ultimately ended with an act of betrayal.
It was a terrible thing that had happened, and what a shame that 2 friends would end up this way. Horrific sadness.
Would tell Christina, I'm sorry it had to happen that way. I feel like there were, things that were done to me that kind of pushed me over the edge. With the problems I was having mentally and with my health problems, I feel like I would never have done this in a normal situation.
There's certain professions that you hold at a higher standard. A police officer shooting into a home with children inside and then claiming she didn't hurt anybody, so she should be on probation. Unbelievable.